All right, before we get started, I just want you to close your eyes for a second. My goal today is to just bring out your passion for recruiting. You've done some amazing work, so I encourage you to speak from the heart, and I'll do the same.
Well, let's do it.
Today, I'm joined by Daniella Bodansky. She has worked at some amazing companies like Flexport, LME, and Dandy. She's a Talent 100 recipient. She's one of those recruiters who's in the trenches, building and scaling high-performing teams.
People want to move really fast, and are they confusing speed with lack of rigor? Because you actually need the bar to go up during rapid scaling, not down. So when you're hiring 50, 100, 200 people in short order, mediocre hires that compounds.
When you join a new company, what is your process? How do you think about tools and technologies? How do you build the talent machine?
Take your errors. You have to learn how to fail to succeed. Things are going to go really wrong sometimes. When you're scaling really fast, that is a big thing. And just as you said earlier, learn which hill to die on.
Hey, RecOps friends, are you still losing hours every week to interview scheduling chaos? What if you could eliminate the back and forth, cut scheduling time by 90%, and actually get those recruiter hours back on the hiring desk where they belong? That's exactly why teams are turning to Rooster, the native interview scheduling platform built inside Workday Recruiting that finally makes interview logistics fast, seamless, and predictable. With Rooster, you connect directly to your Workday system. No extra tools, no disconnected workflows, and instantly let candidates self-schedule with one-click booking links. It handles time zone and language differences automatically, sends branded confirmations and reminders via SMS, email, or WhatsApp, and keeps interviewers, coordinators, and candidates in sync without constant manual follow-ups. And it's not just about speed. Rooster helps you see the true cost of scheduling inefficiencies with its TAS metric, so ops teams can track and improve the parts of the process that slow you down the most. Whether your team hires locally, globally, or somewhere in between, Rooster cuts errors, saves 10 plus recruiter hours per week, and creates a candidate experience that reflects the quality of your brand. If you're ready to stop chasing calendars and start hiring with confidence, visit rooster.us and schedule a demo today. Your recruiters will thank you. Now, on with the show.
All right, what's up, everybody? Today, I'm joined by Daniella Bodansky. She has worked at some amazing companies like Flexport, LME, and Dandy. She's a Talent 100 recipient last year and the year prior. She's one of those recruiters who's in the trenches, building and scaling high-performing teams. She has a sharp perspective on what it takes to hire well when the business is moving fast. Daniella, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me here. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, this is great. Where are you based and what are you working on?
Yep, I am currently based in Miami. I moved here a couple of years ago after spending a very long time in New York. And I'm currently working at Dandy. Been here for the last 3.5 years. I've done a bit of everything here, which is super exciting.
That's great. Now, you've worked with a lot of early stage teams in the startup space. You run the VC world. We do similar work. And I love having these conversations with recruiters who know what it's like to recruit in those environments, because recruiting is not a one size fits all career. Two people can have the title recruiter and have very different worlds and processes. What's it like working in early stage companies, and why did you choose that path?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is the 5th tech startup that I've worked at that has gone through some sort of scale or hypergrowth. I actually didn't start in recruiting. I know the cliche answer is I fell into recruiting, which I hate it, but it is true. I do a lot of R, and everybody says, how did you end up in recruiting? That is 90% of people will get that answer. I actually started my career in clinical research. So I did an undergraduate in psychology with a focus on research. And I used to recruit geriatric patients out of the pre-surgical waiting room to be in a study with me for the great of humankind. So we were not providing any money or anything along those lines. It was really this is going to help make the world better. They were about to go in for an optional, a non-emergency surgery. And they were sitting there waiting to have their pre-surgical kind of consultation. And I would walk up to them and say, hey, do you want to be in a study with me where you may or may not get a drug? So sometimes if you ever thought about recruiting candidates, try recruiting people to possibly take drugs. Obviously, legal drugs that are part of your anesthesia. Yeah, that is what I was doing. And I was doing that for 3.5 years. And I really loved it. I was actually going back to school to do a postbac to be a PI. I really loved the medical world. Unfortunately, the British and the American educational systems don't see eye to eye. So I ended up looking outside of the medical world or medical research. And I looked at what do I really love to do? And I loved working with people. Did I necessarily love working in the operating room? No. I was looking at post-operative cognitive dysfunction and delirium, a fun thing to look at. But I wanted to do something that involved the skills that I'd got in clinical research, as well as continuing to work with people. And I had a friend at the time that was working at a startup called Percolate, which is unfortunately not around anymore, but it was New York City based, CRM for marketing. And I looked at either sales or recruiting, and I started in-house. So unlike some, I've only been in-house for my career. I have seen 5 different companies go through major levels of scale. And I have seen it when people were giving away money and it was a lot of fun. And I've seen it when things get really tight and you have to do what you can with a super lean team and make things happen. I've worked in a variety of different companies across marketing, a lot in healthcare, mental health care, and then have been in some other industries that are digitizing. So some really unsexy industries, I would say, but industries that are fun because they're trying to turn the industry on its head, such as freight forwarding and now the digital dental lab. Yeah, that is how I fell into recruiting, as we'll say, but it was through clinical research and going straight in-house.
That's cool. Yeah, I subscribe to the idea that like every company is a tech company and every company needs smart, innovative thinkers to transform some sort of digital technical experience for the customers, employees, and candidates. So when I think about some of the work I've done outside of tech, those experiences in those projects are a lot of fun. You get a lot of reward. Sometimes they're messier, sometimes they're not the most resourced teams, but I find that's where recruiters grow a lot is when they're put on stretch projects. And there's a lot of great stretch projects that happen in industries outside of IT and the S&P. There's 10 categories outside of tech. And all of those industries need smart, innovative thinkers. So when I think about the market right now and where recruiters are displaced from tech, we'll go find another industry that needs smart, innovative thinkers. When you join a new company, what is your process? Like, what do you put in place? How do you think about tools and technologies? How do you build the talent machine?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really think it's about observing and understanding what's there first. It also depends on like where that company is and what infrastructure they have built out from a recruiting standpoint. So far, if you're coming in like really early stage, it's like understanding, do they have any process? Do they have any technology? Most of the companies I've been at have already had some of that. I've been thankful that I've not been like recruiter number one, but I've actually got to build off of some incredible work that my peers have done. So when I look in, I'm observing. I want to understand like what's built from a process standpoint. Does that process make sense? And like, is the infrastructure built in a way that the company needs it at the time and place that they are? So not building the infrastructure before they need it, but actually looking at, do they have intake processes, structured interviews, calibrated scorecards, they have proper ATS hygiene. Those are the things I'm going to look at the basics. Do they have those things? And then from there, build around. So just for me, it's like looking at what is documented. I think the hardest thing about coming in early stage is most of the time it's tribal knowledge. There is like very little documentation. And the most important thing when it comes to scaling is actually starting to provide that documentation that you can work against. Because if you're going to scale, you need people to do that. You can do a lot yourself, but ultimately you're going to need some support. And if it all lives in your head, you're not going to be able to do that successfully. So it's actually about starting to write down those processes, making them live somewhere, creating great SOPs that are viewable by the people that need them. So it could be you, the recruiting team, the interviewers. Start building out some basic framework for training, making sure we're interviewing against the right things. I think the thing that is interesting when you come in early stage is like, people want to move really fast, and are they confusing speed with like lack of rigor? Because you actually need the bar to go up during rapid scaling, not down. So when you're hiring 50, 100, 200 people in short order, mediocre hires that compounds. So you want to understand generally, what is that bar? What is the current talent bar? How do we always increase and hire on top of that? And how are we creating process in order to make sure that we are actually aligned on what that is? And how do we scale that? You don't want to have a recruiter come in and then just be like, we just need to panic hire everyone. But we actually need to think like, what is an efficient process? How do we not compromise when it comes to standards? And then how do we build out tech around that? So do they have an ATS? Okay, if the ATS is that, oftentimes the biggest thing is there's no data hygiene. So how do we start auditing that? How do we start looking at what does good look based on the things in there? And if they don't have that, like how do we start building the right process around to make sure we're creating better data hygiene to then measure against that? So things like Do they have scorecards? Do they have rubrics? If not, okay, that's easy to build. Once they have that, is it possible to start measuring like what does quality look like based on those things? So just some really basics like that. Maybe that doesn't sound like basics, but like it's the infrastructure you need to be able to start driving success and building the engine.
That infrastructure is exactly back to the point about two recruiters having the same job title that do completely different work. And when you work in an early stage tech company, that process build out, that rec ops function is something that we create for ourselves often when we are teams of one or in a small team of two or three folks and the talent team scales. We also have to think about when we work in tech, like who are our stakeholders? They are engineering minded folks. They love artifacts. They love documentation. So spending an hour a week in Notion creating some sort of artifact around recruiting process, building those question banks with good, great, best response types by level. This is some of the work that can help enable hiring managers to hire better while we're moving fast, setting up those dashboard automations in a Slack channel from whatever ATS you're using. This is critical work, I think, for early stage recruiters to prove their value and to move fast and to know what hills to die on. I think I see a lot of recruiters that get into early stage companies where they think it's fun to work at an early stage tech startup. And like when your stakeholder is a founder, like there's just different hills to die on from when you're insulated from leadership.
You know what's funny? I have never used that term more so than working at a startup, especially any startup that is founder led. I don't think I'd ever used the word hills to die on before working at a startup. And even more so when you become a leader at a startup, because exactly that founders have they have a goal in mind. And oftentimes, no matter how much you think your experience or best practice can show this is what you want to do. If a founder wants to do something their way, that is what's going to happen. And oftentimes the company will have to feel the pain before they're willing to accept that maybe it wasn't the right decision. So yeah, I have used that phrase more times than I have liked, especially when you're going through any kind of like hypergrowth or like massive transformational change, because it's all about compromise. Especially any founder-led company, that is a big part of that.
Yeah, it's so true. You have to understand that give and take. And when you're in an early stage tech startup, like things like best practices don't resonate with founders. Like they don't really care about benchmarks. They don't really care about what somebody spoke about at a conference or a SHRM published thought piece. Like they want results. And for recruiters, regardless of your title, whether you're a first recruiter team of one with talent lead, recruiter, talent partner, head of talent, like whatever, that doesn't matter. Like your job is to deliver a qualified candidate within a very short amount of time. The only thing founders care about is the next person going on their calendar, the person they want to hire.
And is that person best than the last? And I think though, like the big difference when it comes to talent leadership is, yes, you can get a button seat. That is fine. But it's like, what is the talent strategy around that? So it's, are you building scalable infrastructure? Are you bringing on the right platforms? Are you actually building out the right processes in order to do that? So it's, yes, button seat is just recruitment, but like talent strategy is the entire world around that. And are you doing that well to make the company better?
100%. And when I've worked in those early stage companies, like very early, some of the bootstrap companies I've worked with where it's 15 folks, 20 folks, it's you're raising the bar. Shout out to John Vlastelica, who coined the bar raiser. You're working against yourself. The next hire has to increase the average of the company. So if you're hiring multiple headcount against a rec quarter over quarter, your Q2 AE hire has to be a better candidate than your Q1 one. And that's something that is challenging to wrap your head around, especially when we know how hard it is at times to build pipeline and to get that one person through a process that you get to offer. But that rinse and repeat craft is why I do it and why I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also just like even at early stage, it's like that rock stars versus the solid performers. I know bringing it back to the whole, was it Kim Scott thing? But yeah, it's like bringing it back to that. You want like a ton of great performers, but also you need those people that are the bedrock, the people that are going to support the business. And then also on top of that, the people that are going to be those like, we call them like those ops strategists, those Swiss Army knives. That's, I think, one of the most important things, especially at earlier stage, because you have to wear a ton of different hats. So you want people that you can drop them into every problem and use first principle thinking to be able to just actually dissect that bring that down to basics and then figure out how do you solution that along the way. And those are the people that often survive and grow through those companies because they are those strategists. They can come in and they can really execute on problems, especially in an operational based business, and can help drive success. We've seen those people that start off early stage and have that background actually grow upwards and have a high trajectory in a high trajectory way at a company. And I think that those are the people that really help drive the foundation of the company. And even now, like, I'm in a company of a couple thousand people. We're still hiring. Those are still people that like you want to drop in at times when you're like going through transition, when you're going through hard times, because those are the people that will help you solve really hard problems.
100%. And I always think in tech startups and actually in larger companies too, the Pareto principle applies where 80% of the value comes from 20% of the people. So when you think about like retention strategies and using talent personas, we often take that top 20th percentile person and strive to find a similar persona. How do you think about talent personas and retention strategies from the recruiting seat where you're a team of one?
Is this with no HR team or with an HR team?
Either or. I've done it both where I'm the HR team and I'm just like outsourcing benefits and payroll to a provider.
Yeah, I think the first thing you can look at is the quality of hire. You can start to set up surveys in 90 days. Would you rehire this person? And if the answer is no, then you need to look back at your hiring process and figure out like, are you actually testing for the right things? I think one of the things that people often fail to do at any different stage actually is look at what the requirements of the role versus just getting really excited about the person or starting to compare that person against another person. And when you're thinking about the persona, it's actually what does the company need? What is the North Star? How is that person going to be able to work towards those company OKR and goals? And even if the OKRs are changing, okay, great. That's a really easy way to think about a competency there, which is like, how do they deal with ambiguity? How do they deal with change? Thinking about resilience. So those are some really simple ways to think about, is that going to work? And I think like when I think about some of the core principles, it is that, can they move fast? Because most startups, that's what they want to do. They want to work really fast towards a problem, especially when time is money, money is time. You have those compromises. Can they drive through ambiguity? Oftentimes you're figuring out product market fit. You're figuring out, can this person take on really tough problems? Another phrase we use a lot is build the plane as you fly it. I hear that one a lot. So can they do that? And then can they actually work through tough problems? So like that first principle thinking. So if they can do those things and they're aligned with the company's vision and mission and they're excited to be there, typically they're going to be a fit from a persona standpoint. But all of that comes from aligning with leadership, like really down to what does the leader want in the role, making sure that you're aligned from, if it's a co-founder down, getting those people in the room outside of just doing a kickoff, like actually doing a pre-brief with everyone, because sometimes what like the founder actually thinks is important isn't what the hiring manager thinks is important. And if you don't have that alignment, especially as you're growing really fast, you're not going to be able to make that hire because you're going to break the hiring process, or you're just going to take forever to do this because you'll get to a debrief and you're just going to figure out that nobody wants the same thing. So as a recruiter, you're going to be the one that's frustrated because you do all this work and you're like on the hamster wheel, just going and going because you don't have alignment between the founder and the hiring manager, who is oftentimes looking for something that they think might be important, but doesn't align with the overall vision that founder thought they had.
Yeah, I think about our stakeholders and communication and how recruiting can be the ops glue for getting a rec across the line and the velocity in which we need to hire. And one of the best investments for recruiters can be those debriefs, but also a retrospective or postmortem on a hire. I think that type of information is critical. And just throwing that into a Notion with, hey, here's how we're approaching a search for a software engineer. Just do that stuff in real time, make it a data dump, use ChatGPT or your LLM of choice to clean it up at the end. But just as you're working in real time, like add in those notes, pop in a sentence or two after each day or each week, depending on the stage. That kind of stuff can help recruiters in early stage companies really become that strategic talent advisor that we often hear about in the movement of recruiting to like talent partner.
Yeah, right now I'm actually running with the ops vertical. And one of the things we did to drive the acceleration of hiring here was exactly that. We created what we call like our ops recruiting hub. And in there, it is our ops leader's vision of recruiting. This is what it means to be a hiring manager at Dandy. This is like my vision for an operations org. And this is why it should be not a given, but it actually should be a privilege to hire here. And this is like our DNA. This is what we look for. These are the important things. And then we break down the things that are expected. So the expectations. So we create swim lanes at that point. Who's responsible for what? These are the timelines for those things, when they should happen. This is the intake. This is the kickoff. These are the questions and the rubrics that go along with it. We do a calibration document in there on profile. And then at the end of that, we have like debrief references and a retro if needed. And we hand that to the hiring manager. We say, hey, this is your packet. And if it's like the group's hiring for the first time, we actually have our head of operations come in and give that talk. This is why that's important. And then when things aren't going well, so let's say the role's past the SLA, we have dashboards built out where we have what's within SLA, what's about to miss and what's missed. So just like a basic traffic light. And from there, we can go ahead and say, if something's missed or our pass-through rates really aren't where they need to be, let's go ahead and do that retrospective. Let's look at the data and say, like, why isn't this working? And then we can bring it back to the beginning of the process. Is it that we're looking for a unicorn, which oftentimes it is, especially when you're in an industry that's disruptive? I can talk to you very easily about manufacturing. Manufacturing is a very old school industry. There are not that many companies doing what we're doing. So when you look for people in manufacturing for us, we're looking for those people that are trying to break the status quo, trying to break the norm and really be a disruptor. So you're taking people from old school and you are looking for those incredibly smart people that are you can tell are different. They are going to come here and thrive, not just survive. Oftentimes, you have to put a lot of people through the process to see that. We have to dissect that data. We go ahead and we do a post-mortem if you put 4 or 5 people through the case study and you're like, nobody's passing. What's going on? Let's actually look back and see why. A pipelining issue? Is it a volume issue at the top of funnel? Or is it that we are looking for a unicorn or we're not testing for the right things? Or the case study is too specific, looking for things that they may not have the answers to. We're not giving them enough information. So just like really being able to do that analysis and exactly that, just throw it into ChatGPT or have a recruiter really do a deep dive. And that goes back to, as a leader, like I really like to coach my teams to do deep dive into the pipelines to understand the why, understand what's going on, being able to present on that in an autonomous fashion, because I want them to be able to do that successfully. I don't want to be pulled in every time something's going wrong. And obviously I'm there to provide leverage, but I want to give them the tools to be able to do that themselves, because eventually they'll be able to run with that. They won't need me. And the eventual thing as a leader, you want someone to be able to take your job, right? Someone can come in and actually learn from you and be able to do that eventually.
Oh, 100%. And you mentioned leadership. How do you know when a new hiring manager or a founder is like ready to hire or going to be a good partner, or if you're just going to be spinning your wheels?
I think there's a couple of things. Like one, I would love, but this very rarely happens, is they come prepared. They have a job description. They have a thought about what good looks like. They've used their network. They've done all the things. Let's take dream mode. Like that would be dream hiring manager, the one that actually does the work. 99% of the time, like the hiring manager is not. I would say 99%. That's a little high. Sometimes they're going to do the work. Sometimes they're not. And I think the ones that have are the ones that like are really easy to partner with because they've already thought this through and they've put it down. The ones that aren't is where you're really defining that job description with them. You're understanding like, what is the need? Like, how does this ladder up to your OKRs? How does this ladder up to the company's greater goals? And then how do we actually make sure that we are outlining what the basic needs are without overcomplicating the role? And then how do we create a process that really tests for those things? Here we do like values-based interviews. So where we line into our drivers here, we have 10 of them. And we actually assign specific drivers per organization and then make sure that we're testing for those in a really clear way. So does this person have the skills to do the job? Are they aligning from like a culture, vision, mission standpoint? And did their values align with ours? And then are they able to give really clear examples and communicate that effectively? Sometimes it's really just not being able to take something complicated and being able to digest that in a way that is understandable to someone that might not be technical or might not have done it before. So being able to do that and really communicate those things in a way that makes sense for us. Getting hiring managers like on board with understanding what each of those processes are and who owns each part of that. And then I think being crisp on trade-offs. There's always going to be trade-offs in the process. So if you're looking for a unicorn, are you willing to trade on time? If you're going to have someone relocate for the role, same thing. It's always going to be the 3 things that come to mind here are like time, quality, and money. As those are always going to be the three things that will either accelerate a search, help you find the best person, or get that person in seat sooner than you need them. Or in a startup, it's always I need them tomorrow. So that can always help with that, whether it's like sign-on bonuses or using an agency or whatever it might be. These three trade-offs. And then the last thing I think is, are they actually responsive? If a hiring manager is not going to do their job, they're not responsive, they are not filling out scorecards, they are not kind of doing things in a timely manner, then they're not prioritizing the partnership. And that is the biggest part. It's like, this is a partnership. We are your recruiting partners and we're here to drive success.
Yeah.
Recruiting is a service business. Like, I know it, but it's a partnership. Ultimately, our job is to work as a team to drive success. And that means that you need to be responding in a quick manner and providing actionable feedback to get through people as quickly as possible to be able to find the best fit and get them in seat for you. And lastly, it's just like trusting the process.
I want to echo back. It's that idea of time, quality, and cost.
Yeah.
In most searches, hiring managers get to choose two. Like, we as recruiters, like, we can hustle, we can build pipeline, we can schedule, we can give great candidate experience, we can do amazing storytelling. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to what variables can we index on in order to get that rec filled. And I think that helps hiring managers understand, when I've used that time, quality, cost little analogy.
Yeah.
You can't have all three. So I love that you echoed that too. I want to go back to something you mentioned. You said the word quality of hire. It's something that we hear about, we talk about, and you defined it so simply. Would you hire this person again? Is it really that simple to you?
That's bringing it down to its simplest form, right? I actually, when we implemented this, we did 2 surveys. We did one at 30 days and then one at 90 days. Because also, like, when you're working at a startup, oftentimes if you have a HR or people ops that wants to build retention, you're getting a lot of surveys. Even in the recruiting process, like, you could have a hiring manager survey, there's a candidate survey, there's all of these things, and then you're having engagement surveys. As a manager, you have a lot of work on top of your work, and oftentimes I see stuff. I didn't want them to feel overwhelmed. So the 30-day one was a basic question around, did this person actually fulfill the job description that you had required of them? Are they doing the basic role? And then at 90 days, I do think it's as basic as, what do you rehire this person? 90 days should be at how long it would take to ramp somebody. At a startup, oftentimes you don't even get that chance. I remember when I started in my current role, I was pulled out of the program like day 2 to be on the phone. I really had no idea what a dental lab did. You have to, in a lot of cases, fake it till you make it, figure it out, copy a script, be really honest with people. Hey, I'm really new here. Stay tuned. But I'm going to get on the phone with you and figure out, like, are you the best salesperson for us? See if you can sell me on that. But yeah, I would say it is as basic sometimes as, would you rehire this person? Because you're looking at the basic qualifications. Did they ramp effectively? Were they up to the speed of the company? Are they doing the requirements of the role? And are they able to learn effectively and problem solve? Because those are the couple core things you would need to be able to get 90 days and then realize, is that person going to make that pivot and then drive for success? So yes, that is easy as that. Like, because ultimately, if not, you need to look back at the hiring process and see, did I do the right things to hire this person, or were there any red flags? And if there were red flags, why didn't we catch those earlier? Or if we did catch them, why was this hire made? And I can look back on my career and I've been called out. Like, I've been called out being like, hey, like, this person was a no in these places. Why was this hire made? And I said, if you have it in writing that either the hiring manager, in this case, it was like an executive, advocated for this person, you need to make sure that you have that documented somewhere, like why we decided to make this hire. And the flags were flagged at the time. And if they continue to show them through the quality of hire and through their performance, then it makes you reflect on why you did the things you did.
Yeah, this is actually a pretty granular question that I have from my experience that I'm just curious about. Have you used Ashby?
Yes, I have. I got that.
Yeah. And you know how Ashby has a numerical rating where it's like a strong yes is a 4? Have you ever had a hiring manager or like a software engineering leader they want to split the difference between 3 and 4 because no one is perfect and no one gets a 4, but because they're like STEM minded, they lock 4 into meaning this person is perfect, not that's like the 4 for the rating for the scorecard. And then you get like these folks that will write in open text 3.5.
The other one that gets me is this person's a soft yes or a soft no. I'm like, what does soft mean, please? No, I've tried to eradicate that. I'm a big believer in if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. There are no soft anythings. It is a yes or it is a no. And yes, I have said that. And part of that's just training. It is getting them to say, based on the questions you were given, like giving them a really clear rubric. Did this person actually excel at these things? And it's hard. I actually see that across the board, not just in engineering. It's in all different things, in all different functions. People really struggle with that like strong yes, but it's, will this person make us better? I think it really goes down to just like giving some basic interview training and getting people to realize it's like, what do you want to work with this person? They don't have to be the same as you. They don't have to have the same ideas as you, but do you think this person is going to make the company better? And for what you were being asked to test for personally, did they give excellent answers? And if the answer is yes, they gave excellent answers, then yes, that should be a strong yes. If you're like, they gave good answers, and I think they answered the questions well, but they didn't blow me away. They're not better than the last person. Then it's still a yes. But if they're like, no, they didn't do the things I asked, then it's a no. It's oftentimes it's because they're like, it's a personal bias, right? It's I like this person, but it's you might have liked them, yes, but are they actually are they actually answering the questions that you asked them? Are you testing for the things that you need to test for? Are you doing that in a really objective way? And that's also where case studies come into play, because it's the only way that you get like a window into how they will react in an actual real life work scenario versus oftentimes these biases that come into play of I kind of want to work with them, and not hiring off vibes, but actual like real life examples.
100%. And I think what's fascinating about hiring off vibes is we have these proxies for vibes. I think oftentimes hiring in itself is just an exercise in confirmation bias. If we ask a sequence and series of questions, can we de-risk a decision that is making an assumption about a future outcome? And there are so many variables that go into an employee's success. And when I think about some of those proxies for vibes, I always go back to like psychometrics and personality tests.
Yeah.
I feel like using those tools in hiring is such a proxy for vibes. You have a background in psychology. When we see folks with like industrial organizational psych trainings or some of these softwares that are appealing to the human sensibilities of our curiosity around how our minds work. People love personality tests. People love being putting their minds into like bucketed labels. What are your thoughts as a psychology major turned recruiter in tech for how we use psychology that impacts people's lives? Like these are jobs on the line. Should we be doing these little silly assessments to have a distillation of somebody's persona into 16 types or whatever?
Yeah, personally, first of all, I'm going to start with psychology many moons ago. Secondly, I've actually never used them personally. What I have used them for is like team building, because I think it's really helpful from a working styles perspective in my own personal team to understand how people's brains work, because it helps from a cross collaboration and communication standpoint. So if someone's really analytically minded, or someone, really needs to see things versus just like hearing things, like it helps in a team dynamic to create better collaboration. It helps people understand why people may answer a question the way they do, or why a certain person might act the way they do, because that's how their brain works. However, like I can give you an example. I just spoke to a candidate recently, and what they said to me was something really interesting. They did a tilt assessment, and in that assessment, one of the things that they weren't good at was process. Or it was one of their weaknesses. And what I loved is they gave me the answer is it allowed me to understand that was my weakness. However, then it allowed me to actually create a growth plan and a dynamic way to work towards that. And now that's my strength. And I actually love that answer because I think it's good from a personal development standpoint. It allows you to understand like, where at least does a psychometric test say, I'm not very good at this? And if that's something that is incredibly important in your career or in something that you're doing as part of your job function, and then you can say, okay, that's saying I'm not that great at that. I'm going to do all the things to help me work and create growth plan to make myself amazing at that. And for someone who's highly successful, that is actually a great tool from a performance development standpoint. So I love that in the sense of like, how do you develop people? How do you actually a great performance development program for somebody with goals to work towards? Or how do you also use it in a tool that helps them collaborate more effectively because you understand working styles? But I don't love it for interviewing because I don't necessarily think, and maybe I'm sure other people have, ideas or thoughts behind this. I don't think it's something that's needed, just creates an extra step. I also think vibes are interesting because when you're in earlier stage of founder like companies, and a lot of times it's something that's important because you have to work with a founder or you have to work with like leadership that's highly involved. And what it means is that can you actually work in that working dynamic? Are you going to have a positive working experience? And part of that is just, do your personalities mesh? Because when you're working with founders, when you're working with earlier stage companies or leaders that have very strong opinions, if not, like that working relationship's not going to be successful. So it's about having the founder or having that leadership member spend time with that new leader or new team member that's coming in and figuring out, like, does that dynamic really work?
Yeah, it's so true. I always go back to this kind of idea that recruiters and hiring teams make decisions on who we want to hire based on data. Oftentimes, candidates, when they have two offers, they go off gut or they go off vibes. So it's two different sides of the equation that we have to solve for. And vibes, I think, gets too much of a negative connotation in the same way that bias online gets pigeonholed into being bad. Like all humans have bias. It's neither good nor bad. It's just something that exists. So when I think about hiring for the vibes, yeah, like we do want to lean into that. Like we do want to understand like engineering culture. We do want to define the culture and the value and the vibes, but these are all proxies. It's the same for like a culture interview, a values interview, a founder interview, et cetera. Like they're all pulse checking. We're still humans. And I think candidates want to be seen as a human. Like I love taking a candidate out to dinner. I love those types of cool moments that we get to have with people and getting to know how this role fits into the narrative they want to tell about their.
And that's why I think recruiting will always be human. I know a lot of these conversations have been like very AI driven and a lot about technology, but like recruiting, no matter what, it's a human interaction. When you ask a lot of people, why did you join a company? It's around like your passion was infectious. I felt how much you loved this company and what you did. And that's based on your experience, right? Which is, again, a bias. It brings you back to this is how I feel about the company and why. And that passion is what really gets people. It's your stories you tell. It's how you tell them. And I think that's what will get people to change their minds. Yes, it's data, and that brings it back down to the recruiter. Like the recruiter is the one that really gets to be the force behind that. And then again, when you say about like the manager and taking them for dinner and whatnot, a person oftentimes they leave a company because of the manager, not necessarily the company. And you need to make sure that manager and that a direct report have the right rapport, have the right dynamic. And that goes back into those feelings, those vibes. Do they work together? And if not, you're not going to have the right retention. So ultimately, you're right. There is a lot of biases that are there, but you do your best to mitigate those, but make sure that you are creating the right dynamic where the people that you bring in, you'd want to work with them.
All right. So you've been recognized by the Talent 100 list twice now. What do you think differentiates yourself from the pack, or how can folks become somebody like you? What does that mean to you to be recognized by the industry for the amazing work you're doing?
Thank you. I think, first of all, I was really surprised when I got those, and it was really just amazing to see that I was recognized by that. I think part of it is I've seen a lot of early stage scale, and I've taken a lot of bets coming in at companies where they are disrupting very big industries that have had very little disruption. So I'm really good at finding the people that maybe come from an old school industry, but are ready for that change. And part of that is just having the calls, getting to know the people, getting to know the industry. And what I've done, and I think I've done really well, is I've shown that I care about their story and I care about why they want to make those changes. And I've found that I'm really good at just understanding people and getting to know why about what excites them, and then being able to understand the business really deeply and then be able to translate that to how that candidate's going to change that business in some way, and getting them to really believe that story and believe that they are that person that's going to do it. And then obviously testing for the right skills and then watching them absolutely crush it and kill it in that role. and building those relationships to do so. I think what's differentiated me is I have been able to build machines that have done that. It's not just have you done that at small scale? No, it's about how do you take a company from 50 people to 2,000 people? How do you build a machine that's going to hire that at high volume and then create the processes, the infrastructure to do that, and then get your teams to learn the nuances. So the bits that I care about, getting them to care about that too, and learning from them, learning about what makes them tick, and then how they think about building those processes, and then getting them to drive it too. So for me, I think what has differentiated me is I come from a core of caring and putting yourself in those people's shoes, understanding the industry, and then building the infrastructure and the machine that will not just build a small company, that's going to build a monster machine, that's going to actually hire not 100, 200, that's going to hire thousands of people at scale. Unfortunately, I've been in situations where I've got to do that 2 times over now and seen it done really well and learn from the places that I've gone wrong, and then bring those learnings to these new companies, and then being able to do that multiple times over. So I think that is really helpful. It's been creating the machines that have scaled a company and scaled them well, both on the national scale and on the international scale. I was doing European recruitment at Flexport. At Dundee, we're in multiple countries from a hiring standpoint, and it's training the right people to create the infrastructure to do that.
Is there any advice you've received that you want to pay forward?
Take your errors. Like, you have to learn how to fail to succeed. I definitely think that was one that I was given because things are going to go really wrong sometimes. That when you're scaling really fast, that is a big thing. And just as you said earlier, learn which hill to die on, because you're going to deal with so many problems and you can't take all of them at once. And also sometimes, no matter how much you want to do something your way, the company needs to go first before they're to try a new thing. That is something that, and that kind of goes back to learning to fail. You have to be comfortable with seeing that failure and then being like, okay, that didn't work. This is why I think we should do it this way, and being comfortable with that. And then documenting it all along the way and making sure that you have that somewhere in writing so you can go back and be like, hey, look, we've seen this. It didn't work. We're going to go try it this way instead. And not being afraid to experiment. I think like oftentimes like recruiting is people think about it in a kind of black and white way. Like, it has to be done this way. You have to follow this process. No, try things a few different ways. You'll get feedback. You'll get feedback from your team. You'll get feedback from candidates. You'll get feedback from your hiring managers. Feedback is the best tool to make you better because you can incorporate that into your hiring process and figure out how to make it better along the way. Even going to people like consulting groups or external help. I honestly think the biggest thing that has been helpful for me is building a recruiting network, like having people even outside of my company that I can trust. Yeah. Really good advice. Like, I've been some amazing stuff. I know if I ask a question, like, I'm going to get people that have been at insane companies that will give me advice from their background that will help me get better. I always say that. I'm always going to go to my network first.
100%. I think of all the amazing recruiters and mentors I've had that I can go to for any question, or even just like when you're a team of one jumping on a sourcing jam, be like, hey, you want to just hang out and source together for an hour for folks that are doing similar work in a different company. I'd love to hear what you're up to. This has been an amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed it, Daniella. How can people stay in touch with what you're up to?
Yeah, sure. Find me on LinkedIn. Use my LinkedIn. LinkedIn. What is it? LinkedIn.com, Daniella Bodansky. You can find me there. So yeah, I'm not on too many socials, but definitely find me on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, always reach out. I'm always happy to have a conversation, just give my learnings as well as network. Yeah, thank you so much for the time, Brandon. This was absolutely lovely. I've really enjoyed getting to chat with you, and thank you. This is fun.
Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely.